Australia is no stranger to wildfire. It has stalked the land down through time, a primal force. But man has increasingly populated areas in fire paths and is only now learning we are no match for the ferocity of an Australian firestorm. In this episode, events that defined a nation, stories of survival.
There's my house, it's still standing.
And tragedy. Races with death.
Gun it.
And unwinnable battles. Trapped and face to face with a monster. The victims, the heroes, and the unstoppable power of nature. On Savage Australia, Fire. Indigenous Australians were masters of control burning and fire management.
The Indigenous people of this great land use fire in so many ways, whether it was for clearing, whether it was for revegetation to help them with hunting and access to food. There is much that we can learn from the traditional owners of the land and how they use fire.
During the 18th and 19th century, European settlers' inability to cope with alien and extreme environments led to unprecedented devastation. Since those early days, the biggest fires have burnt themselves into Australian history. These fires were named after the day of the week they occurred: Black Thursday, Red Tuesday, and the one that changed Australia's attitude towards fire forever, Black Friday.
The Gippsland forests of Victoria are swept with smoke and raging flame. Some of the worst bushfires that Australia has ever experienced. Fires that bring destruction and even death. In these amazingly dramatic pictures, we show you a holiday camp surrounded by fire.
On Friday, the 14th of January 1939, the temperature reached 45.6 degrees Celsius in Melbourne. These extreme conditions caused a number of fires to break out. A strong northerly wind swept the state, causing several of the fires to combine into one massive front. The fire leapt from mountain peak to mountain peak, obliterating towns in minutes. 3/4 of the state of Victoria was affected by the disaster.
1939, particularly for Victorians and probably for Southeast Australians, was the pivotal moment for us in fire history. It was the time that white settlers said, hey, we get significant fires in the landscape. And you need to understand, it wiped out large towns. It wiped out communities. It took 71 people's lives.
It was the fire that changed everything and marked the beginning of the modernisation of firefighting in Australia. From bitter experience, our understanding of the nature and science of bushfires has grown over the years. When a bushfire reaches a certain size, its behaviour begins to change, becoming dangerously powerful.
When you've got a large bushfire occurring, the air's being all drawn in, we see these convective columns being formed out of large-scale bushfires, which become very volatile.
As wind pushes the firefront forward, it gains speed and intensity, consuming the fuel in its path. A huge convection column rises high into the atmosphere above the inferno.
You're talking about an extraordinary force of combustion and energy coming together, and once it starts, it continues to self-generate and build itself.
On February 16, 1983, more than 180 bushfires fanned by powerful winds swept across South Australia and Victoria. The Ash Wednesday bushfires were to be the most devastating Australia had ever seen. Prior to that fateful February day, it had been the worst of summers, with more than 10 months of severe drought. On the land, animals searched for food on the side of roads. Many farmers made the heartbreaking decision to destroy their precious livestock, while in the city, they were running out of water. The week before the Ash Wednesday bushfires, there was a hint of things to come. Strong winds lifted 200,000 tonnes of dry soil from the ground, creating a huge dust storm across southern Australia. The dust cloud was so large and thick, it blocked out the sun in the middle of the afternoon in the capital of Victoria, Melbourne. The day began with clear skies and an expected temperature of 34 degrees. The concern was a hot, dry, northerly wind forecast for the area. In Adelaide, the temperature soon hit 40, and with wind gusts expected to reach more than 100 kilometres an hour, it was a recipe for disaster. The first hint of what was to come started shortly before midday in Adelaide, when a fire was reported just south of the city. Reports of more fires came quickly. From the north in the Adelaide Hills, farming country in the southeast, and on the other side of the mountains. In just 2 hours, major fires were burning on 6 fronts, and the strong winds kept the fires coming.
Something like 120 houses at risk up here. I don't know how many have gone. We are in deep trouble.
Fires moved at such speed that thousands of firefighters and volunteers just couldn't compete. Visibility over Adelaide became so bad, traffic stopped, power went off in many areas, and people trying to flee their homes were trapped. Adelaide radio journalist Murray Nicol put his life on the line that day, working as a volunteer firefighter. He reported on the ferocity of the firestorm.
At the moment, I'm watching my house burn down. I'm sitting out on the road in front of my own house where I've lived for 13 or 14 years. It's going down in front of me. The roof is falling in. It's in flames, and there's nothing I can do about it. Absolutely nothing. There's been a fire unit here from Summertown pumping water till we ran out, and the flames are in the roof. And God damn it, it's just beyond belief. My own house, and everything around is black. There are fires burning all around me, all around me.
The journalist was lucky. On that same street, 4 people died. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the wind changed direction. There were now dozens of major fires burning around Adelaide. Locals were powerless. The fires were moving too fast. The fire crews simply no match for the flames. Such speed and ferocity had never been seen before. Meanwhile, in Victoria, it was early afternoon when the first fires broke out. Temperatures had hit well over 40 degrees, and just like South Australia, nobody could have predicted the disaster that lay ahead. An outbreak began at Deans Marsh, a small dairy inland from the Great Ocean Road. Fire tore through the surrounding ranges and struck out at coastal towns. Further along the coast, 100,000 hectares of rich dairy country would be destroyed as thousands of residents were evacuated.
Bushfires can burn up to 1,000 degrees, if not more, at the main fire front. You see the results of the intensity of that fire decimating and consuming whatever it might be in its path.
50 kilometres from Melbourne, in the Dandenong Ranges, more fires raged, spreading south and east, taking out entire towns. By the early evening, people were fleeing for their lives. Many had frightening escapes.
And the flames came right over the top of the car.
Top, and then the wind changed and blew them right back over us again. That happened about 3 times before someone came and got us out.
The daylight hours of Ash Wednesday were bad enough, with so many fires burning through South Australia and Victoria. But just before dark, with the wind suddenly switching direction again, the worst was yet to come. At sunset along the Great Ocean Road, the wind change sent the fire back along the coast at enormous speed, covering 10 kilometres in 8 minutes. The fires burned through towns and bush, only stopping at the sea. The whole of the hills were alight. Houses literally blew to bits.
A windstorm come in about 140 mile an hour and put fire from Clark's Spur back into Aireys Inlet, and most of the trucks that they were waiting there, fire trucks and emergency service are waiting there, were lucky actually to get out of there with their lives, not alone their vehicles, because the wind was so strong and you couldn't see a couple of feet in front of you. It broke windscreens of cars and backs of cars and houses just lifted houses and roofs up hundreds of feet into the air and mattresses, and they just floated around up in the sky. You could see them, you know, it was a fantastic sight to see, but a terrible sight to see at the same time.
What was once a haven for holidaymakers, retirees and honeymooners was now just charred remains. At dawn on the Great Ocean Road, where the crowds had fled to the foreshore, people woke with no idea of what, if anything, was left.
We've got nothing. We took 2 budgerigars with us and a few baby clothes, and I think my daughter and I might have a pair of slacks each, and that's about it. We just didn't have time to get anything.
The widespread destruction from the Ash Wednesday bushfires was nothing like we'd ever seen before. Over 3,700 buildings destroyed, hundreds of thousands of livestock were lost, and a total of 75 people were killed. They died while fighting to save their properties, and they died as they tried to escape. Ash Wednesday, one of the worst natural disasters in Australia's history.
One of the big characteristics of bushfires is that they're burning very heavy fuels, large leaves, you've got lots of twigs, you've got bark, all the debris getting rushed up into this massive column, they're all burning in a light, so the column starts pouring them out the top, and with the strong winds, the columns can take all those burning embers, many hundreds of metres, many tens of kilometres in the most extreme circumstances, well ahead of the main fire front. And as those embers are landing in unburnt country, they're starting new fires.
Many of these spot fires are drawn into the main front. For anyone inside the impacted area, the surrounding fires can appear chaotic, leading to confusion and wrong decisions. In 2003, southeastern Australia was in the grip of severe drought. Among the worst affected areas was the Australian Capital Territory, home to Canberra. In January, several small fires were burning around the edges of the ACT. A series of dry lightning strikes swept over the vast expanse of the Namadgi National Park and Brindabella Mountains. Fire crews were dispatched into some of the most remote sections of the bush, but the eucalypt forests had been decimated by years of drought, making the fires difficult to contain.
The smoke close around, you could only see 100 metres or so. It was pretty eerie and rather worrying, and you felt very much alone.
For more than a week, a fleet of choppers kept the flames at bay. But in the nation's capital on the morning of Saturday, January 18, residents woke to the news that the fires had broken containment lines overnight and were being fanned towards Canberra's suburbs.
Once it gets to this road, we're going to let it burn right up to the road, but we're going to stop it from getting in the suburbs. That's our objective.
The plan was to stop the fires from crossing the Murrumbidgee River corridor. The gusty winds and high temperatures had other ideas.
T0 Delta 4, the fire has broken across Yarragamba into the houses, over.
OK, what do you need?
What started out as a few discreetly burning fires was now one enormous blaze.
I have flame height probably over 100 feet on Warrigan.
By midday, firefighters' worst fears were realised.
Sam, this is a rare situation. We need some pumpers here urgently. We've got houses alight everywhere, and we really need some more structural protection.
The ferocity of the blaze had taken the whole country by surprise.
Good afternoon. Welcome to a special bulletin updating the fire crisis in the Australian Capital Territory. And the situation in Canberra is far worse than anyone could possibly have imagined.
As the crisis worsened, there was no sign of authorities gaining control.
Sam, we've lost total visibility. Whoa.
Terrified residents were caught out and fighting to stay alive.
We have lost.
Get in, mate. Quick, Steve.
When they left, over.
Good luck, boys.
And firefighters battled to keep it together in the confusion.
These missions blowing up. We're trying to put some water up. Put this house up here. She's going.
Is Burnsy here with you?
No, he's not, mate.
Sam, we've got 2 firefighters on the count for it.
The firefighters were eventually found, but the confusion continued. Burning pine forests surrounded the southwest suburb of Duffy, where the first houses were lost. Firefighters were dispatched to the suburban fringe, but were quickly forced to retreat. Almost simultaneously, Revette, Holder, Evatt and Canberra were alight with residents fleeing for their lives.
come on, jump in the fire truck and we'll take you up there. It's much safer, okay?
Yeah, right.
There's nothing you can do here, okay?
Our animals, we've got animals.
I know, just come, it's just not safe here, okay?
Thousands of residents took shelter at emergency evacuation centres as fires ravaged their homes. A cool wind change brought an end to the fire emergency, but it was too late. The damage was done. 4 people were confirmed dead. They'd all been battling the Firefront in vain. More than 500 homes were destroyed and thousands of people left homeless.
A very intense bushfire will take control away from you. The trauma that it brings, it tests every element of your resilience. You think you've got a plan, you've got everything sorted out, and next minute smoke is billowing over you, you can't see. Fire will take over your environment. What comes with that? It challenges our senses, our ability to cope, our mental health, our physical health. It has huge impacts.
Victoria was in the midst of an intense heat wave and had gone 2 months without rain. On Saturday, February 2nd, 2009, the sun rose over a parched land. The temperature quickly climbed into the 40s and the winds blew hot and strong. Mid-morning in the Melbourne CBD, and senior firefighters are concerned. They were studying the Fire Danger Index, which measures temperature, wind speed, humidity and fuel load.
I can remember the day of Black Saturday when the Bureau of Meteorology gave us the forecasted figures, and we looked at them and these can't be right. These are literally off the scale. And at that point, we've gone, we're in trouble.
An hour's drive north of Melbourne lies the town of Kilmore. At 11:47, 60-kilometre-an-hour winds tore down power lines. A fire was ignited and the catastrophe had begun. By the time firefighters reached it, the fire was uncontrollable and racing towards the 4-lane Hume Highway, jumping it like it wasn't there. Outrunning the fire trucks and with warning systems already stretched, it began taking out houses in its path. One of the first towns to be hit was Clonbinane, home to the Scicluna family.
There's fire down there, Dad. I arrived home, probably about 10 minutes before the fire hit. My family was already putting things in place. Sprinklers were on around the house. They were getting all things prepared.
We've got fire down there, down the back.
Do we?
Yeah.
All right, so it's coming to us. Yeah, look at the embers. We're getting embers.
Inside now, bud. Inside.
It's strange, even when the fire was coming, my partner said to me, you know, there was almost a feeling of, let's get this over and done with.
Look how big it is over there. Come on, we go. Let's go take refuge. One more. It's right on us here. Have a look.
The trees were getting totally consumed as it was coming at us. And there were probably 2 or 3 times when we thought, this is the main front coming.
The gas bottle!
Put it back on the gas bottle! All right, in now, Dad.
Come on,
in. Go, let's go.
We realised that we were getting a wave of fire, and then we'd go outside and do some more preparation work. And then I think about the 3rd wave of fire, we realised that this was the one that really had the sting in it.
Don't go out anymore, Dad, because this is getting hot. The door is. No, we're surrounded now, Dad.
All right,
this is too hot. This is too hot.
Out of here now, Dee. All right, windows closed. Put the blinds down.
We were hoping that the windows would hold. The sprinkler system would put enough water down to create enough water vapour, I guess, to take the sting out of the fire. Deep down, when I saw the front coming, there was a real concern on my part as to whether we'd made the right decision to some point to stay and defend. But there was no other option either. You know, there was no leaving at that point. Yeah.
No way out of here.
We were literally surrounded by fire. Every window we looked out at, there was just fire everywhere. The ember attack was enormous.
There's stuff coming in!
What?
Where?
Close the door!
Just move.
All right, someone go upstairs.
I'm right to go out and have a look, all right?
No, not yet. Not while the show's working like that.
No, I'm not going in yet.
Nah, not on this side yet, Dad. It's still burning very fierce.
You got what?
It's still,
What's that?
it's still very fierce on this side.
It is, Tony. Don't go out there yet.
In the end, they got through, but the fire continued to burn up into Mount Disappointment as the winds built, sweeping it southeast towards the tiny town of Strathewen on the other side of the range. At 3:37 p.m. in Melbourne City, the temperature reached 46.4 degrees. It's now the hottest place on Earth. More fires blazed into life, and by mid-afternoon, 10 out-of-control fires were burning. The catastrophe was growing. Emergency services were hopelessly swamped as call after call came in. Firefighters in many cases could only sit and watch and try to save themselves.
Do not move. It's too dangerous to move out onto the road at the moment. Just stay in survival mode.
Stay in survival mode? That's an understatement.
The sprinkler system on top of the truck saved their lives.
Here it comes. Oh, Jesus, look at it. Hey? Yeah, we're copping the full brunt of it at the moment. We'll be right.
Hundreds of fires were now interacting, the firestorm throwing embers up to 35 kilometres ahead of itself and spotting into new fires. No one had ever seen anything like it.
This is literally unprecedented. It is outside what we'd experienced, it's outside what we'd been taught. It was something completely unique and different.
At 3:45, the fire reached the ridge above Strathewen. Tragically, the residents still had not been officially warned as the fire exploded over their town.
You had no idea of the chaos that was going to happen. Absolutely none, because it just hit Strathewen in an absolute firestorm.
Look, people are trying to evacuate.
By the time the crews reached the town of Strathewen, it was way too late. 22 lost their lives. Refugees of Strathewen head for the presumed safety of Kinglake, but they are heading into a maelstrom. Confusion and panic ruled the roads as people, in desperation, attempted driving to safety. But fires were everywhere, and there was nowhere to run. With visibility at near zero, there were inevitable deadly pile-ups and accidents. Some just drove off the road, leaving the occupants at the mercy of the flames.
You will see so many cars on the sides of road, into trees, down into culverts, smashing into other cars, because you simply lose all visibility.
21 people died that day on the road or in their cars. By early evening, 400 fires are raging and 50 lives have been lost. Unbelievably, it was all about to get much worse. The fires had been swept by the winds to the southeast, the fire stretching from Kilmore to Strathewen and St Andrews. But now the wind begins to shift. It's the nightmare scenario. The southerly change starts to push the fire to the northeast, which means the eastern flank has now become the head of the fire. It's now a 50-kilometre long fire front.
The big issue for us is the wind change. That's where people get killed. It's this complacency thinking, oh, the fire's heading down south. The wind change and the fire then heads towards the east, and that front takes out a lot of people, a lot of houses, a lot of property.
At 5:55, an urgent threat warning is issued for the town of Kinglake. But it's too late. Panic erupts. The main street is suddenly an inferno. Survivors describe what happened.
We just listened to everything just explode. Houses exploding, cars blowing up. It's apocalyptic up there.
It happened so quick, no one had any hope of getting off this mountain.
We've lost a lot of people up here and a lot of homes.
It rained fire is the best description I can give.
At one stage, a mother called a radio station to plead for help. she was trapped with 8 children.
It's surrounded completely by fire and we're just waiting for it to hit. I don't know, we've seen no emergency or anything like that and we really need help right now.
Her brother came to the rescue, driving a tractor to the house and saving everyone. But Kinglake was on its own.
We could not get trucks in. People don't realise that as the fire went through, trees came around everywhere. There were people trapped on roads. It was just absolutely horrific and very, very difficult, bordering on impossible for us to deal with all those issues.
Witnesses spoke of tornadoes of fire bearing down on them.
Fireballs just going, you could hear them exploding, like flames, I reckon, 60, 70 feet high. I've never seen nothing like it.
In desperation, some broke into the local pub to hide in the cool room, while others scrambled for any shelter they could find.
And all we could do is actually crawl underneath a pipe about this big, underneath the roadway, where a creek was going through. I'd be dead right now if I didn't.
For Brian Burke and Kylie McGill, it was a living nightmare, and Brian somehow captured it on this amazing video.
6 o'clock, it's supposed to be light. This is the sky. It's really, really smoky. I don't know if you can hear that noise. I'll be quiet, but it sounds like a thunder.
Brian and Kylie were at home when the fire came out of nowhere.
I've never heard a sound like that before in my life, and it's pretty scary. This is the house next door, but I can't save it. The front of the paddock across the road is on fire. Are you okay? Just please, Kylie, get in the house. No, you'll get burnt. We haven't got any water to fight this with. We've just got to help try and save Trev.
Brian was working hard to help his neighbours and takes command.
Yeah, just keep wetting it. Wet the house, wet the roof too. There's no point putting that out because you won't get it out, just wet the roof. I can't breathe, I've got to go inside. That's it, I can't breathe. I thought we were gone. I didn't think we had any chance. There's trees exploding, as you probably just heard. Oh no, I can't believe this. Anyway, we'll do what the...
Not convinced he was going to make it out alive, Brian recorded video goodbyes for his children.
Alex and John, if anything happens to me, I love you guys so much. You're my whole world, and everything in my life is for you, and I love you both.
Everything I've built, gone, going. 2 beautiful children are going to grow up without a mum.
Thankfully, they decided to retreat inside their house. That's probably what saved them.
The biggest advice we give people, don't be there. There is only one fail-safe measure in southeast Australia, one of the 3 worst bushfire-prone areas of the world, and it's not to be there.
Darren Gibson was one of the many who had moved his family to the area for the good life. His wife, Leslie, and his 3 children, Kiona, Jai and Ava. But no one could have imagined what would happen that day as the fire approached Darren's house.
I looked across at the paddock. It was a bare paddock with just like wheat fields, and I could see the fire starting to race towards me.
Darren tried to fight the fire with the garden hose, but the heat was too intense. The family took refuge in the house.
We had to stay inside for some sort of shelter, even though the house was on fire. And then the house, even the flames, was going across the roof. And we were still there, but then I got a big gulp of like poisonous gas or something like that, and it almost choked me, and I said, get out, get out.
Darren grabbed 3-year-old Jai and baby Ava. His wife Leslie took 4-year-old Kiona. But once outside, the flames seared their skin.
And then Leslie was screaming, it's burning, it's burning. So then I said, Leslie, we've got to go down the mountain. So I said, you have to jump the fence and go, you know? And so she's jumped the fence with Kiona and gone down.
But when Darren caught up, he found Leslie slumped on the burning hot earth.
And I'd noticed her sitting there. I noticed her sitting there on the ground with Kiona like this, nursing her. And I just couldn't understand why Leslie was sitting on the ground over there. And I've yelled to her, get to the dam, go to the dam. The dam was about another 20 metres. And she yelled to me, I can't move. And she was sitting on the ground, and I don't understand how she could be sitting on that ground. So I thought, okay, I've got to try and save Ava first. And I put Jai down on the towel. And I ran straight across to the dam. There's a little fence. I just threw Ava over. I don't even know where she landed. Just threw her. And then I'd run back. And I was screaming every time my feet hit the ground because my shoes had melted off already by this time. And I was running. Every step I was just yelling, try and get the pain away.
In terrible agony, Darren searched desperately for his son.
I got back to where I thought Jai was, and I'm looking around. There was a lot of smoke, and I couldn't find him. I couldn't see him anywhere, and it's so, you know, and I just ran back, seen Leslie and Kiona had passed away, and
his wife and daughter dead, and unable to find Jai, Darren raced back to where he'd left 2-year-old Ava at the dam.
And we laid there on the edge, just on the edge with all of our body in the water and just our heads out. And she was just laying there with her eyes closed saying, Mum, Mum. I told you Ava was tough. She was just laying there going, Mum, Mum. And I was talking to her, sweetheart, we're getting lollies soon. We're going up to the shop and we're going to get lollies and we're going to go and see Mum. But she had her eyes closed. I don't know where she was. She might have been in limbo, I don't know where. And at that time I started to nod off myself, actually.
Father and daughter were finally found by a neighbour and rushed to hospital, where Darren spent a month in a medically induced coma. He awoke to find that Ava too had died.
She looked really peaceful, and when they decided to turn the machine off. So she was really peaceful, and I prefer to think of it as she decided to go with her mum and her brothers and sisters. It's probably a good thing because she was quite burnt. Although I would have loved her to be with me today.
Darren suffered shocking injuries, so bad that he eventually lost parts of his legs. Remarkably, Darren has since bounced back, and with new prosthetics and a new partner, he's somehow making the most of a whole new life. Sitting low in a valley, picture-perfect Marysville had always considered itself relatively safe from fires. But as the monster gathered on the range above, the feeling of dread was palpable. Resident Daryl Hull shot these scenes before the fire reached them, a huge plume of smoke hanging ominously over the township. But locals were unfazed, going on with daily chores, thinking the smoke was coming from a different fire at Kilmore. Then, embers began raining down from the surrounding hills, thousands of them. Daryl made it to a lake and spent around an hour partially submerged and sheltering under overhanging branches. Those that could make it gathered at the Oval, including fire crews, who could do nothing but watch in horror and receive treatment themselves. When Daryl emerged, he continued to film buildings in flames around him.
Look, it was just shocking. There was death in that community. It was just horrific stuff, just horrific, gut-wrenching sort of stuff in that Marysville community.
More than 30 people died in Marysville, and almost all the houses were destroyed. Meanwhile, the fire that has ravaged so much and killed so many is not finished. It rages north, engulfing the towns of Hazeldean and Flowerdale. In these towns and the surrounding hills, the night's carnage is appalling, with 9 dead. the destruction and despair continued for many days. Until at last, the monster was subdued, but what was left was in ruins. Houses, landscapes, and lives. Despite the incredible efforts of more than 19,000 Country Fire Authority members, there were 173 deaths in total, the nation's highest ever loss of life from a bushfire. 414 were injured, 640 homes lost, an estimated 7,500 people were displaced. The Black Saturday fires will live in infamy as Australia's worst bushfire disaster to date. One of the key factors in the deadly speed of the Black Saturday fires was the steep terrain.
Topography plays a big part in bushfires and bushfire behaviours. Fire travels uphill for every 10 degrees of slope. You add a doubling of the speed of the fire up that hill. The vegetation is being preheated by the fire as it's coming up the hill. You add to that wind pushing the fire behind, so it's preheating and getting things combustible much quicker than it would be if it was burning across flat country.
On the 16th of October, at the Marangaroo Army Base, 3 kilometres west of Lithgow, a fire accidentally ignited when anti-tank ammunition was detonated in a military training exercise. What started out as a minor fire quickly became a major concern.
It was hot, it was dry and it was windy. The conditions were right, these fires started, they took hold very quickly, and then they effectively, with strong winds, consumed whatever was in their path.
By early afternoon, the fire had spread more than 30 kilometres and could now be seen heading for the southern side of the iconic Blue Mountains. By midday on October 17, the weather conditions had deteriorated even further, and the battle to save the Blue Mountains was on. The idyllic bush communities turned to hell on earth. Jeez. The howling dry winds and scorching temperatures were winning, with houses burning, streets closed, and hundreds of children caught in the middle.
My house is fine. My kids are in at the school, and we don't know. No one can seem to tell us where they are. I need to know, and no one's giving me answers.
On the northern flank of the Blue Mountains, a huge fire front was burning from Lithgow in the west to Bilpin in the east. Firefighters desperately trying to stop it jumping the Bells line of road. Another blaze took hold in bush around Mount Victoria, and in the east, fires were raging in the hillsides and valleys around Springwood and Winmalee, a fire ridge stretching a total of 300 kilometres. The speed and intensity of the bushfires was so severe, they were simply uncontrollable. Residents had to save what they could and get out.
Got the cat out. Nobody else here, so that's cool. Just comes tearing up from work. But, oh, geez. Yeah, I got to see what else I can salvage before it gets too bad.
Don't worry about it.
I got it.
It's time to go. Forget it, bro. It's time to leave.
Yeah.
It's too hot, it's too smoky. Get out, man. It's the smoke that'll get you. Let's go.
The erratic winds made it impossible to predict the fire's next move.
We've had the fire, it's gone over Hawkesbury Road. We've got through the first front. We're just doing property protection at the moment. I'm not sure where the front is now, but we're trying to make sure that everyone's safe in Winmalee. It's the most intense fire I've seen for a long time.
And it took its toll on the front line, with firefighters collapsing from heat and exhaustion. As the fire marched on, more and more volunteers arrived, but they were fighting a losing battle. Despite their heroic efforts, 2 lives were lost and 300 homes destroyed. As each Australian summer approaches, the forests are tinderboxes full of fuel, just waiting for a spark. But we are learning to fight fire with fire. It may look like arson, But this is protection.
Commence, 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 commence.
On the ground and from the air, authorities start fires early so they don't have to fight them later. Australians are only now realising what Indigenous Australians knew thousands of years ago. Fire can either be a helpful servant or a terrifying master.
My attitude is fire is part of our environment, and we can actually learn to use it in a way that provides a high level of protection.
I can't see us ever wanting to go back to an era where we allow the fuel to dictate the lives of our people. We must keep on top of the fuel, and prescribed burning is the best way to do that.
The thin line between bushfires and disaster are the firefighters. Since the early days, they've been battling the odds.
You don't have to go back too far when we were still using branches or saplings or hessian bags on the end of poles, or if you were pretty advanced, you had a leather beater, and they would literally beat the fires out.
Rudimentary equipment and techniques have gradually developed over the years, along with a better understanding of fire behaviour. Informal command structures have given way to highly organised systems. The volunteer firefighters of each state's rural fire services bear the responsibility for up to 90% of the state's land and assets. Being that most bushfires occur away from capital cities, that means that these volunteer firefighters are often the front line of defence in most bushfire emergencies.
It really has been, in more modern times, that we've seen a massive advancement in firefighting vehicles, firefighting tankers, but also firefighting equipment. We've got aircraft in the air, helicopters, right through to the very large air tankers, carrying up to 44,000 litres in one load. The men and women are still the ones that put the fires out on the ground, but it's the technology behind the scenes that's making a massive difference today, and is certainly a dramatic contrast to where we were only a matter of decades ago.
Despite these advancements, the authorities are still concerned. And with predictions of worsening weather in coming years, is Australia really a safer place?
Australia is a continent that's recognised as always being fire-prone. Tens of thousands of years ago, fires burnt across the landscape. The records show that, history shows that, early settlers identified that. And the reality is, fire's going to be a natural part of our landscape for centuries to come.
As we continue to build in and around the bush, we're tempting fate.
I love the bush because it's such a beautiful place, but there's going to be a day where the bush gets angry. So what is a beautiful environment, for all the reasons you want to live there, then all of a sudden it turns on you and it becomes the aggressive environment.
The message is, be aware of the dangers, heed the warnings and plan ahead. But if you find yourself in trouble, you're on your own.
It's what people do anywhere in the world in a natural disaster which will determine whether, and it's this stark, whether you live or whether you die.